Shabbat Sholom. First of all, Mercedes, I have a wedding in Mexico tomorrow, actually. I'm going to wear the tacos al pastor kippah. Let's see how that goes. Let's see how they like it, right? It's one of those things that you do not put tacos in a kippah. That's one of those things, right? But it's okay. I guess we're starting a new fashion statement. And it's just not any tacos. It's tacos al pastor, which is even better. Okay. This Torah portion of Hayei Sara is really one of the monumental moments in the story of our people. Notice how I say story and not history, right? Because what we glean from the Torah is not necessarily factual history, but it's certainly part of the story of our national psyche and how we become who we are. And let me start by telling you that this parsha contains the antidote to the world in which we live. And what do I mean by that? We live in a world that is completely permeated by anger, by impulsivity, by people saying horrible things, especially when it comes to Jews and Israel. The past couple of years have shown us that there's no limits to what people can do and say. Even things that we thought once were not possible are becoming possible, and people are just like saying them and doing them. So how does this happen? How does this happen in society, not only to us, but to anyone else? So I want to present to you the idea that one of the reasons why society goes astray is because of invisibility. People stop seeing the other, and they only see themselves. Only themselves matter. Only what happens to them matter. And so, it is only their own narrative, no matter if it's real or not, what gives meaning to their existence. The case in point, by the way, has been that terrible war we've been fighting in Gaza for the past 2 and something years. It's not that we do not see the pictures many times made up. It's not that we do not understand the numbers, very much inflated, of the death on the Palestinian side. By the way, it's a war. People die in wars. We didn't start this war. This war was thrusted upon us against our will. And that's an invisible fact, by the way. That has become an invisible fact. So while the world sees the same things that we see on TV and in social media, they do not see us. And they stop seeing the source of all of this. Now, it's important to understand what this means in the concept of the Jewish tradition, in the context of the Jewish tradition. Whenever your arrogance, the Midrash says, allows you to remove your heart from another human being, that's when destruction actually begins. That means when you stop seeing the other person in front of you. So, when we stop acknowledging the death, the rape, the burning of babies, the social violence, the raping of women in the kibbutzim, when we erase those images, we become invisible. And that's part of what got us to the point at which we are. And here comes Parashat Hayei Sara. And here enters Rivka. Rivka, by the way, is the ultimate kind person. Not because I'm telling you, but because that's the way it's written. The whole story of how Rivka comes about is engineered by our tradition for her to become the kindest person that ever lived. As a matter of fact, the Talmud says, Kol ha'oseh chesed, anyone that engages in kindness, Ra'ul lidvak bezaro shel Abraham, is destined to become part of the heritage of Abraham. And that is to say, if you cannot be kind, you cannot be Jewish. That is one of our national traits. And that's why Rivka is one of our matriarchs. Rivka was not chosen because she was beautiful, because she was, according to the text, or because she was strong. By the way, she was super strong, and I'll prove you why in a second. Right? She was chosen because she had compassion, and she was naturally kind. It's not that her pedigree said, Rivka is a kind person that lives in the valley. No. She showed it. She proved it through her actions. She had proactive kindness, the kind of proactive kindness that we do not see every day in our lives. Actually, the text says, Bataratz, and she ran. She ran to perform an act of kindness. She ran to do a mitzvah. And Rashi explains later that the reason why she ran so quickly was because she was so enthralled with actually performing mitzvot that she couldn't stop herself. And I know we all know people like that, right? They'll say, oh my God, my life's cause is to perform mitzvot, to observe the commandments. But then they fall short. You shouldn't talk too much. You should do things, which is exactly what Rivka is proving. And now, here is the proof of her strength and the proof of her kindness. There were 10 camels that came with Eliezer, Abraham's servant. And this is a true fact, scientific fact, I'm not making it up. How many gallons of water does it take to water a camel? 50 gallons of water per camel, which they can drink in about 3 minutes. I know this sounds crazy, but this is true. And if there's 10 camels, there's 500 gallons of water that she has to bring to the camels. Now, unless she was a Russian weightlifter, I don't know how she did it. But she was a very powerful woman. And she moved a lot of water. By the way, if you're from Mexico today and you don't understand gallons that well like me, that's 2,000 liters, more or less. Okay? 2,000 liters of water for normal people. That's a lot of water. How do you carry that? So then our sages explain, it's not that she physically carried the water. She satiated the camels not only physically but spiritually. And she was able to care for the needs of the animals, not only physical, but she also looked through the animals and was able to look at their souls and make them less thirsty. Now, if you ask me, that's a superpower. And that's what makes you beautiful. And that's, for sure, what makes you kind. And this matters. This matters because in a world that is blind towards the needs of others or to the reality of others, where we can only see what happens to me, Rivka is able to see the other. And not only is she able to see people, like Eliezer, she's able to see animals too. Imagine the kindness in her heart. Now, to be true, Eliezer prays, right? Before he approaches, he prays. He says, oh God, be graceful, be kind to Abraham. Provide for her daughter, for his son, a daughter that is compassionate and kind. And here enters Rivka. So we kind of like know that God sent Rivka Eliezer's way. But honestly, this really proves that the crisis in civility in our world is a crisis in visibility. I'm going to just give you an example. How many times have we been in a red light at the intersection of the 215 and Rainbow? And there's a homeless man or two homeless men that come with signs that say literally, please notice me, I'm hungry. When was the last time you actually saw them? Many of us probably take out $1 or a quarter, whatever it is, and give it to this person just to get them away from us. But when did you actually see them for the last time? Do you remember what they looked like? Or do you just remember a generic homeless person? Do you remember what they were wearing? Perhaps they didn't have a shirt on, and they were so burned from the sun, it was almost hurtful. When was the last time you saw that person? So, Judaism proposes Radical kindness as a method of resistance in a world that's cruel. So let me tell you what radical kindness looks like. During the Syrian civil war, many ISIS fighters were abandoned in the fence that separated Syria and Israel. And they were abandoned there because they were dying. Every day, the Israeli Defense Forces picked 10, 20, 15 of them up and brought them to Israel for treatment. That is radical kindness. And by the way, I'm going to tell you how I know this story to be true, because I lived the story. A young man, not so young anymore, that I grew up with in Mexico City, Sami Tobias, is the head of neurosurgical trauma now at Hadassah in Jerusalem. But before that position, he was in Nahariya, in the hospital that was taking all of those Syrians in. And I was there. And I saw him interact with the Syrians, who, by the way, at the beginning, when they heard they were in Israel, wanted to commit suicide when they woke up from the surgery. But in the end, not a single one of them wanted to go back to Syria. That is radical kindness. That is how you repair the world. Radical kindness means that when you are in the Golani Brigade, or you're in the Paratrooper Brigade, or the Givati Brigade, and you go into Gaza, you carry chocolate bars with you and water to give to the children. You won't see this on CNN. Radical kindness means that when you see a stray dog, also in Gaza, you take him home to Israel. You know how many stray dogs were picked up from Gaza? Again, true number. Over 1,800 stray dogs were brought to Israel. That is radical kindness. That's what we do as Jews. And we shouldn't stop. We should never stop. Because the moment we stop, we no longer are worthy of being descendants of Abraham Avinu, of Abraham our father. I want to share with you a story, which actually, it's not a Jewish story, but it's a wonderful story. In 2012, there was a picture on the front cover of the New York Times. Those were the days when the New York Times was a good newspaper, that actually circulated around the world later in social media. It was Officer Larry De Primo, an Italian descent police officer in the NYPD, was pictured in the front cover of the New York Times in Times Square. He was on patrol in Times Square on a very cold night, and he saw a homeless man without shoes, freezing. So Officer De Primo went into a store and with his own money bought a blanket, socks, and boots and put them on this homeless man. And there was somebody, a tourist, snapped this picture and sent it to the New York Times. Now we're all saying, well, all of us would have done that. The matter of fact is we don't. We just walk past these people every time. So that picture made it around the world because it showed radical kindness. We have to become people who see others. So I have some homework for you. This weekend, see someone you haven't seen in a long time. Maybe it's a congregant who always sits by him or herself in a corner. Maybe it's a person who always makes the bad jokes and you don't want to go near him. But it's time to see that person and talk to that person. Maybe it's your neighbor. So here's another confession while I'm confessing things. I don't know my neighbors. I've been in the same house, which is an anomaly, in Las Vegas for the last 25 years. and I do not know the names of my neighbors. I gather that I'm not the only one. Do you know the name of your gardener, by the way? Okay. It's an important thing to do. All of these people around us, they're not just here to fulfill a mission. They're part of our lives. And here's my last story for the day. In 2010, and there's a documentary by the BBC called Human Kindness Diaries, which is incredible, which we all should watch at least once in our lifetime. They document the case of a man by the name of Shimon Nezapayeke. Now, you know who he was, by the way? He is. He's a famous person, by the way. So Shimon Nezapayeke was a bus driver in Rwanda. And during the height of the Rwandan genocide, he actually, who was a Hutu, took a busload of Tutsis, 52 of them to be exact, across 7 different checkpoints and into safety. And in every one of those checkpoints, when they asked him, who are these people? He would say to the soldiers, they are my family. If you kill one of them, you might as well just kill me too. And they lived. He later became prime minister of the Central African Republic, this bus driver. And I want to offer to you that he didn't become prime minister because he was the smartest or the most read person, but he was the kindest. And to end today, my favorite phrase, my favorite saying, my favorite citation from any Jewish philosopher, Abraham Joshua Heschel. He once said, when I was young, I admired smart people. Now that I am old, I admire kind people. Shabbat Shalom. Let us please rise. We continue on page 184 with the Chatzi Kaddish for Musaf.